At that dinner table, my brother laughed, said I was still a nobody. Then his wife pulled out her phone, Googled my name, and the room went silent. That moment changed everything. If you've ever been underestimated, erased, or told you wouldn't make it, this story is for you. It's not just about revenge. It's about becoming the person you needed when no one believed in you. Ethan Dawson had spent years crafting a life that felt both extraordinary and invisible. As the founder of Vivid Mind Studio, an acclaimed digital learning platform blending online courses, podcasts, and personal development media, he had quietly amassed a $10 million empire from his minimalist condo in Miami. Yet almost no one from his past knew. Not because he hadn't wanted to share it, but because being seen had never been safe. Ethan's identity remained discreet by design. When Vivid Mind grew from a niche YouTube channel into a full-scale brand, he took the advice of Lydia Harper, a blunt but brilliant journalist who'd become his closest ally. Use a legal entity to front everything she'd urged. Build the brand, not yourself. He listened. Public records listed a faceless LLC. He declined interviews that asked for personal details. Even his team only knew him as the quiet founder with a vision. Ethan wasn't hiding out of arrogance. He was protecting what he'd built from being reduced by those who'd always doubted him, especially his family. His older brother, Ryan Dawson, had long been the golden child. Charismatic, athletic, and socially magnetic, Ryan had spent their shared childhood effortlessly basking in parental praise. Margaret Dawson, their mother, doted on Ryan's football trophies, his prom photos, his fraternity letters. Thomas, their father, more reserved but no less proud, seemed to beam a little brighter when Ryan walked into the room. Ethan, in contrast, had been the quiet one, bookish, curious, obsessed with cameras and early editing software. Where Ryan drew crowds, Ethan got silence. Their suburban Illinois home had felt like a stage on which Ethan was never invited to perform. When he spent weeks preparing a science project in 8th grade, an animated breakdown of molecular structures using stop-motion clay figures, he'd won first place at the state level. But when he tried to share the news at dinner, Margaret had smiled politely and asked, "That's wonderful, Ethan. Did you hear Ryan was named varsity captain today?" The overshadowing wasn't always intentional, but it was relentless. Ethan learned early to measure his worth in silence, what he could build without applause, what he could endure without praise. Ryan, meanwhile, rarely missed a chance to remind Ethan of his supposed place. Still making your nerd videos, he'd smirk during college holidays. "Let me know when you get a real job." Ethan had never responded. Not really. He internalized the jabs, folded them into late-night edits and endless rewrites, letting the noise of his brother's derision fade beneath the hum of purpose. He had dreams then, not of fame, but of making something that mattered. He believed in knowledge and personal transformation, in helping people become more than they thought they could. But he also believed that no one in his family would ever take that seriously. It wasn't just Ryan. Margaret often dismissed Ethan's efforts with a well-meaning but oblivious tone. "That's a cute hobby," she'd say, peering at his early YouTube uploads. "You should do something more stable like your brother. He's already managing client accounts." Thomas tried to connect, offering the occasional nudge of support, but even he seemed more invested in Ryan's traditional success. There was one moment Ethan never forgot. Senior year of high school, Ethan had applied for a competitive media scholarship. He spent months refining his portfolio, tutorials on study techniques, explainers on emotional regulation, all laced with creativity and clarity. Ryan offered to drive him to the interview, only to oversleep, making Ethan late by nearly an hour. "Relax," Ryan said with a shrug as they sat in gridlocked traffic. "It's not like you're saving lives." Ethan arrived flustered, his laptop crashing mid-presentation. He barely made the cut. When he got the scholarship, no one at home celebrated. Ryan muttered, "Guess even nerds get lucky," while Margaret praised him for doing his best with what he had. These were the bricks that built Ethan's wall. Not bitterness, but boundary. Not revenge, but resolve. He went to college alone, graduated without family at his ceremony, and built vivid mind in the echo of that silence. He didn't need them, he told himself. He had Lydia, his audience, his mission. That was enough. But sometimes in the quiet hours of the night when Miami's city lights shimmered across the bay, Ethan wondered what it would feel like to be truly seen not by fans or followers, but by the very people who once ignored him. Would they even recognize him now? Would they understand what he'd built, or would they still see the quiet, awkward boy who never quite belonged, he never expected to find out? Not until a thin, white envelope arrived one humid morning, tucked among business letters and invoices. It was elegant, gold-trimmed, embossed with the words, "You're invited." Ryan and Claire's 5-year anniversary celebration. Chicago, no note inside. No apology. Just a time, a date, and a return address. For a moment, Ethan held the invitation like a wound reopened. Then slowly he placed it on his kitchen counter. He hadn't seen Ryan in over 5 years, hadn't spoken to his mother in longer. But something about that card, a whisper of unfinished business, perhaps lingered in the air like a challenge. Ethan didn't know it yet, but that invitation would crack everything wide open. The envelope sat on Ethan's kitchen counter for 3 full days, untouched, but never unnoticed. It seemed to glow under the sunlight that filtered through the glass door, more like an artifact than a message. Every time he passed by, a part of him paused. It wasn't the invitation itself, it was what it stirred up. He knew exactly what this was, an olive branch carved not from peace but obligation. There was no note, no "we miss you." Just a date, a venue, and a beautifully printed line, "You're invited." Ryan and Claire's 5-year anniversary. 5 years. Ethan tried to picture their wedding day and came up empty. He hadn't been invited. He sat down with his coffee, staring at the envelope like it might open itself and explain. He imagined Margaret, their mother, fussing over floral arrangements, and Ryan adjusting his collar and hair. Claire remained a silhouette. He'd only seen a photo once, years ago, in a Christmas email he didn't respond to. He'd deleted it. What did they want from him now? He didn't owe them anything. Not a reply. Not his presence. Yet as he scrolled absently through his inbox that morning, one message caught his eye. A young teacher in rural Montana thanking Vivid Mind for helping her cope with burnout. She had found Ethan's voice through a friend's recommendation, binge-watched 3 seasons of his micro-documentaries, and called them a lifeline. Her email ended with, "Your work makes people feel less alone." That line stayed with him. Later that night, Ethan called Lydia. She answered with her usual dry wit. "Are you finally quitting society to live in the woods? Because I have a guide for that." He chuckled. "Ryan invited me to their anniversary party. Seriously, dead serious. No note. Just a card." Silence. "Then you thinking of going?" "I don't know," he admitted. "Part of me feels like I should ignore it. Another part, I don't know. Maybe I want them to see me now, not to gloat, just to exist in their sight." Lydia was quiet for a beat. Sometimes she said finally, "We think closure means confrontation. But sometimes it's just choosing to walk into the room as we are, not who they remember." He didn't answer. That night, Ethan stood in front of his mirror, holding the card like a trigger. He could almost hear Ryan's voice from years ago. "Let me know when you get a real job." Ethan had turned that comment into an empire. With a slow breath, he opened his laptop, found the RSVP link, and typed yes. The next morning brought with it a bite of Chicago winter. Ethan opened the door to the delivery man and signed for a suit navy classic cut tailored to precision. He hung it up near the window, letting the light fall across the fabric like armor. He spent the day tying up loose ends at the studio, prepping his team for his absence. He didn't share the real reason for the trip. Only Lydia knew. That evening his phone rang. Unknown number. He debated answering. Curiosity won. "Hello, Ethan," a crisp voice asked. "Yes, this is Claire Whitmore, Ryan's wife." There was an elegance to her tone, clipped but intentional, like someone used to managing details and people. "Thank you for confirming. We're pleased you're coming." Ryan was surprised. "I was too," Ethan said. She let out a light laugh, practiced and empty. "Just so you know, we've invited a very curated group, some of Ryan's clients, local officials, a few media reps. It's quite a night. We hope it'll be polished." Ethan heard it, the warning tucked in velvet. "Behave." "Thanks for the heads up," he said. "I'll keep it polished." There was an awkward pause before Claire added, "We have a theme too, classic elegance. Just a heads up in case you're bringing a guest." "No guest," Ethan replied. After she hung up, he stared at the phone for a long time. The way she said Ryan was surprised played on repeat. Not impressed, not curious. Surprised as if Ethan's name had been a ghost slipping through their curated guest list. That night, Ethan unearthed an old, vivid mind script he'd never published. It was titled "The Last Temptation: Why We Still Want Recognition from the Ones Who Rejected Us." In it, he'd written, "Sometimes the heart doesn't need justice, it just wants to be seen, not for validation, for completion." He closed the file. Not today, maybe soon. He packed lightly 2 suits, a journal, a vintage camera he hadn't touched in years. As he zipped up the case, he caught his reflection again. Same face, same eyes. But there was something steadier now, like a person who no longer needed to prove anything. Still, part of him hoped, if only for a moment, that someone would see. At the airport, he slipped on his noise-canceling headphones, queued up a playlist titled "Silent Strength," and boarded the flight. The sky outside was streaked with soft orange clouds. As the plane lifted into the air, Ethan Dawson looked out the window and whispered, "Let's finish this." The Chicago air greeted Ethan with its familiar chill, crisp, blunt, and devoid of pretense. As the cab weaved through downtown and into the quieter lanes of the northern suburbs, memories clawed at the edges of his calm. He hadn't been back in almost 6 years, but the streets hadn't changed. Brick buildings, trimmed hedges, lawns manicured to suburban perfection. It was the same world that had once called him invisible. The anniversary celebration was hosted at the Hawthorne Club, a colonial-style event hall, where the Dawson family had celebrated Ryan's graduation, their parents' anniversary, and several networking mixers Margaret had organized to highlight her eldest son's blooming career. Ethan stepped out, adjusting the lapel of his navy suit. He looked up at the arching white doors and took a breath. Just a building, he told himself. Inside, the scent of vanilla candles mixed with catered hors d'oeuvres and too much cologne. Crystal lights glimmered above tables dressed in cream linens and gold-trimmed place cards. Classical music played just loud enough to be elegant, just soft enough not to distract. And then came the faces. Margaret Dawson saw him first. Her lips parted in a fleeting moment of surprise, then curled into a strained smile. "Ethan," she said. "You came. I said I would." She leaned in a brisk kiss on the cheek. "Well, you clean up nicely." He almost laughed. Almost. His father, Thomas, followed with a handshake too formal to be familial. "Good flight." "Fine," Ethan replied. "And then Ryan." The golden sun stood near the fireplace, dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, drink in hand, surrounded by a small ring of guests, laughing at a story he was telling. His eyes caught Ethan's, and for a second they both froze. Then Ryan walked over, drink still in hand. "Ethan," he said, voice calm. "Didn't expect you'd actually show up. You invited me." Ryan chuckled. "Yeah, but that's like inviting Elon Musk to your garage startup. Doesn't mean he's coming." Ethan gave a small smile. "Good to see you too." They hugged briefly, an awkward choreography of shoulders and distance. "You still doing those motivational YouTube things?" Ryan asked, eyebrows raised. "They're a little bigger now," Ethan replied, keeping it vague. Ryan nodded, clearly uninterested. "Claire will be thrilled you came. She's around here somewhere finalizing the slideshow." Ethan wandered to the bar for a sparkling water. The air was thick with polished small talk and curated identities. He felt like a ghost at his own funeral present, but unseen Ethan. He turned. A woman stood near the bar, holding a tablet and wearing a deep green gown. Her eyes were curious, intelligent. "I'm Claire," she said. "Ryan's wife. I figured. I just wanted to say thank you for coming." Ryan said it was a long shot. He nodded. "Wasn't sure myself." She smiled politely and looked around before whispering, "You know, this might sound strange, but I think I've heard your voice before." His brow lifted. "Really, yeah. Last month I had this podcast on in the background while prepping for a client dinner. The guest was talking about trauma recovery and emotional learning. Your voice narrated the opening. The platform was called Vivid Mind." Ethan tilted his head, surprised. Claire snapped her fingers. "That's it. I thought it was excellent. Insightful. I actually saved the episode." He offered a modest smile. "That's me." Her eyes widened. "Seriously, seriously." She blinked, genuinely taken aback. "But Ryan said you did media consulting or something." "Technically accurate," Ethan said dryly. "I consult on how people grow." Claire laughed, but there was an edge of awkward realization. "Well, that explains a lot. Your voice was powerful. The way you framed vulnerability, I've never heard anything like it." Ethan offered a slight bow. "Appreciate that." Before she could say more, Ryan returned his smile, not quite reaching his eyes. "Hope you're not boring my wife with psychology stuff, E." "Not at all," Claire replied. "Turns out your brother is the voice behind that podcast I kept quoting last month." Ryan blinked. "What, the one from Vivid Mind?" "Remember the guest speaker on boundaries and parental neglect? Ethan runs that platform." There was a visible shift in Ryan's posture. Claire noticed. Ethan noticed. Ryan masked it with a laugh. "Huh, didn't put that together. Well, guess you've been busy, little bro." Ethan raised his glass. "Always." Later, as guests were ushered to their seats, Claire leaned toward Ethan and whispered, "You know, I think your work has probably helped more people than you realize." He looked at her and for the first time that night felt seen, not for what he used to be, but for what he'd become. And even surrounded by curated perfection, Ethan realized something quietly profound. No matter how long someone tries to snuff it out, real light always finds a way to shine. Claire sat alone at the edge of the reception hall, her tablet momentarily forgotten on her lap, her eyes fixed on the space Ethan had just occupied. Something about his manner, calm, composed, almost too composed, stayed with her. She hadn't realized until that brief conversation how much of him felt withheld. Curiosity bloomed, while the slideshow of photos from the past 5 years played behind her: wedding moments, vacations, networking galas. She unlocked her tablet, pulled up her podcast library, and tapped the Vivid Mind episode again. As Ethan's voice filled her ears, something clicked. She opened a browser and typed Vivid Mind Founder. The search results loaded instantly. Ethan Dawson, founder and CEO, Vivid Mind Studio. Her breath caught. She tapped a Forbes article titled, "The Quiet Titan of Self-Development: How Vivid Mind Became a $10 Brand with No Face." The profile listed quotes, insights, but no photos. Ethan had kept his image out of it until now. Claire's fingers trembled slightly as she glanced across the room to where Ryan was laughing with two business contacts. She turned her screen toward one of the guests sitting beside her. "You know this voice," she whispered. The woman listened, then widened her eyes. "That's Ethan, Ryan's brother." Word spread fast. Whispers swept through the tables like a ripple across still water. "Wait, that's Ethan Dawson, the one who built Vivid Mind. I've used his planner system. My therapist recommended his course. He's been on TED Health podcasts, right?" Ryan, catching the sudden shift in energy, turned. One of his colleagues approached with a cautious grin. "You didn't tell us your brother was that Ethan Dawson." Ryan's smile faltered. "What are you talking about?" The colleague showed him the screen. Ethan's name, the company, the valuation, all of it. Claire stood beside him now. "He's been helping people all over the world while we thought he was doing freelance video edits." Margaret and Thomas had drawn closer, peering over shoulders. "Ethan," Margaret echoed. "Our Ethan." "Apparently, yes," Claire said. "Your son built an empire in silence." Margaret stared, a dozen old assumptions crumbling quietly. Across the room, Ethan noticed the hush. He knew that look. Recognition mixed with disbelief. It was the same look his high school counselor gave him when he won that scholarship. The same tone former classmates used when they realized he had more influence now than the jocks they'd once worshipped. He walked toward the garden doors, seeking space, air, quiet, but Claire followed him. "Ethan," she said gently, "you never told them." He shook his head. "I didn't think they'd care." Her voice softened. "They do now." He exhaled. "I didn't come to make a scene. You didn't. You just showed up as yourself. That was enough." They stood in silence as the murmurs grew behind them. Inside, Ryan sat stiffly, surrounded by guests, suddenly more interested in Ethan than him. And Ethan, he didn't smile. He didn't gloat. But in his quiet heart, something both heavy and healing shifted. Back in the hotel room, Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, his posture still but his thoughts loud. The evening's revelations played back like an old VHS tape frame by agonizing frame. The murmurs, the stares, Ryan's frozen expression. And Claire, genuine, curious, almost grateful. Not for the drama, but for the truth. He leaned forward, elbows on knees, staring at the floor. He didn't feel vindicated, he felt cracked open. His phone buzzed. A message from Claire. "Whatever happens, thank you for showing up. Some of us see you now." He swallowed hard, overwhelmed by the simplicity of it. How rare and unfamiliar it felt to be seen. He lay back, staring at the ceiling, then closed his eyes and drifted backward. He was 11 again, back in the family kitchen, a science project in one hand and a bent spatula in the other. "Look, Mom," he'd said proudly. "I built a wind turbine with old fan parts." Margaret glanced over her shoulder, half distracted by the meatloaf in the oven. "That's nice, Ethan. Just don't leave a mess. Ryan has a recital and I want the house clean." Ryan was always the golden child. Sports trophies, straight teeth, effortless charisma. Ethan was the smudged shadow following behind, trailing odd questions and stranger hobbies. "Why are you always in the garage?" Ryan would scoff. "You're like a weirdo mole." And when Ethan had won the regional science fair in 8th grade, Ryan had laughed, "Congrats. So you're king of the nerds now." Their father had clapped Ryan's back instead, saying, "That piano piece you played was unforgettable, son." Ethan remembered blinking through the silence, holding his certificate like it was a shield. These memories didn't surface often, but now they came with clarity, not as accusations, just truths. He opened his laptop, instinctively clicking through the back end of Vivid Mind. Metrics, messages, feedback. Hundreds of thousands of people who'd found healing through the work he'd built. People who didn't care about family legacy or hometown gossip. People who saw him. And yet tonight had chipped something deeper. He hadn't wanted revenge. He'd wanted presence. He wanted his mother to say, "I see what you've built, Ethan." He wanted his father to remember their afternoons tinkering with camcorders in the garage. He wanted Ryan, no-needed Ryan, to acknowledge that the little brother he'd mocked had carved a world from silence. The knock at the door was soft. He opened it to find Claire. Her expression was unreadable. "Can I come in?" He nodded. "I'm sorry," she said, sitting down across from him. "For not knowing, for not asking." "You didn't do anything wrong," Ethan replied. "You just believed what you were told." She hesitated. "Ryan's unraveling. He doesn't know what to do with this." Ethan sighed. He never did. Claire looked at him, something shifting in her eyes. "But now everyone else sees. And I think maybe he can't stand that." Silence filled the room. "I didn't want to come here to be recognized," Ethan said. I didn't want to be invisible anymore." She nodded, eyes glistening. "You're not." They sat quietly for a while, two people caught in the aftershock of truth. When she left, Ethan stared out the window toward the glowing Chicago skyline. Healing, he realized, didn't start with forgiveness or reconciliation. It started with seeing, with naming the hurt and allowing the mirror to crack. He wasn't there to fix the past, but he could finally look at it without flinching. Ethan awoke to a soft knock. For a moment he lay still, unsure if it was real or if his mind had carried last night's conversations into his dreams. The hotel room was bathed in the hushed blue of early morning shadows, casting long lines across the floor. The knock came again, gentle, hesitant. He sat up, reached for his robe, and moved toward the door. Outside stood his parents, Margaret clutching a brown paper bag like a peace offering, and Thomas shifting from foot to foot, unsure of how to stand in a hallway of regrets. "Morning," Thomas said. His voice held no weight, but his eyes tried to carry something heavier. "We brought breakfast," Margaret added quickly. "From Germain's. They still make those lemon scones you used to like." Ethan opened the door wider. "Come in." They stepped into the room as if stepping back into his life. Everything about them felt smaller than he remembered, their movements slower, their expressions more fragile. The silence grew full, then uncomfortable, then necessary. He gestured toward the small table by the window. The skyline beyond offered the only neutral ground they all could share. As they sat, Thomas took a slow breath. "I've seen your work." Ethan's gaze met his father's. "I found your channel a couple years ago. Didn't even realize it was you at first. A colleague at the college was struggling burnout anxiety. He sent me one of your videos on resilience." Ethan blinked. "You never said anything." Thomas nodded. "No, I didn't, because I didn't know how. And because Ryan said it was just internet stuff. He made it sound like a hobby you were too proud of. And maybe I let that influence me more than I should have." Margaret lowered her head. "We failed you, Ethan." He looked at her. Her voice trembled, but it didn't break. "I thought I was pushing you to be realistic, to be safe. I didn't see what I was crushing in the process." She looked down at her hands. "And when you started to pull away, I let you go because I didn't want to face what I might have done." Ethan stayed quiet, letting her words land. "We celebrated Ryan because we understood him. He played by rules we recognized. You built a whole different game, and I didn't know how to watch, let alone cheer." He leaned back, letting out a slow breath. I didn't want applause. I just didn't want to feel invisible. Thomas reached for his coffee. I think I knew that. I just didn't know how to make space for both of you without stepping into conflict. And I've always avoided conflict, sometimes to my shame. Margaret reached into the paper bag, pulled out the still warm scones and placed one in front of him. You were always so quiet, she said. So self-contained. I convinced myself you didn't need anything from us. I didn't see the silence for what it was. Ethan picked at the corner of the scone, the tart lemon scent tugging at 1,000 childhood memories. Birthday mornings, snow days, Saturdays with a book on the couch. I built what I built, he said finally, because I had to believe that my voice mattered somewhere, that if it couldn't in that house, it could out there. Thomas nodded slowly. And you were right. It does. Margaret's eyes welled. I don't expect you to forgive us overnight. I want you to know I see it now. Not the brand, not the success. I see you. Ethan turned to the window. The city stretched beyond, but this moment felt more intimate than any skyline. He thought about how often he'd imagined this, his parents knocking on the door, words of regret finally spoken. He'd imagined anger, confrontation, even triumph. But what he felt now was something quieter, something closer to relief. I don't know where this goes, he said, but I'm here, for now. They sat in stillness for a while. Margaret wiped her eyes. Thomas sipped his coffee. Ethan broke off a piece of scone, and on that balcony above a city waking slowly, the silence between them shifted from barrier to bridge. That evening, the knock at Ethan's door was softer than the mornings, but carried more weight. When he opened it, Claire stood there, her face drawn, her eyes tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. I'm sorry, she said. He stepped aside silently, motioning for her to come in. Claire took a seat at the small table near the window. She looked down at her hands, then back at him. I believed the version of you Ryan painted, she said. Some harmless, lost younger brother. I never questioned it. But after everything yesterday and the way he's been reacting, Ethan, I needed to say I was wrong. He nodded but said nothing. He wanted to let her speak without the pressure of forgiveness yet. Claire continued, clients are pulling back. A few said they're reconsidering deals because of how Ryan handled the whole revelation. Some of them are fans of your work. I didn't realize how much of a following you had. Ethan sighed. That's not what I wanted. I know, she said, that's the thing. You weren't trying to expose anyone, you were just living, but truth has a way of echoing. Silence lingered between them, not awkward, but heavy. I've told Ryan I need space, Claire said at last. I asked for a separation. Maybe it's not permanent. But I need to figure out what I missed and why I let myself miss it. Ethan looked up sharply. Claire, I didn't. She held up a hand. This isn't because of you. It's because of how I've been living. Ryan, he's built his world on controlling the narrative. But truth finds cracks. And your story, it cracked something open. He leaned back. I didn't expect any of this. I know, but I'm grateful. She stood, straightened her coat. I needed to say it to your face, that I see you. That I'm sorry I didn't sooner. After she left, Ethan sat by the window watching the night pull its shadowy blanket over the city. He wasn't sure what hurt more, the years lost or the honesty finally surfacing. The next day, Ryan showed up. He didn't knock with ceremony, didn't announce himself, just barged in like it was still high school and Ethan's room was a place he could occupy. You happy now? Ryan snapped, pacing the room. Claire's gone, my inbox is a war zone, and Mom and Dad are treating you like you cured cancer. Ethan didn't flinch. None of that was my doing. You set the tone. I just showed up. Ryan scoffed. You could have told me, prepared me, given me a heads up instead of letting everyone blindside me. I gave you years, Ethan said, rising slowly. Years to ask, to listen, to care. I didn't need to ambush you. Life did that on its own. Ryan's mouth opened, then closed. For once, the right words didn't leap to his defense. Ethan continued, voice quiet but steady. You built your identity on being better than me. And when I stopped competing, you lost your audience. That's not on me. Ryan started, but the words evaporated. I don't hate you, Ethan said. I don't even want to hurt you. But I'm done pretending the past didn't leave marks. Ryan's shoulders sagged. You always looked like you had it together, Ryan mumbled. You were so calm. It made me feel like maybe I wasn't enough. Ethan's eyes softened. We were both hurting, Ryan. We just hurt in opposite directions. Ryan stood in the quiet. I don't know what to do with this, he admitted. You don't have to know, Ethan said. You just have to start telling the truth, especially to yourself. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Ryan gave a small, slow nod. And as he left, there was no anger between them. Only the space forgiveness had made. The Miami sun welcomed Ethan like an old friend. The moment his feet touched the familiar tarmac, a strange calm settled over him. The city hadn't changed much, the same warm breeze, the same sea salt in the air, but something in him had. He felt lighter and heavier all at once. He didn't tell anyone he was back. He needed time to think. Back in the familiarity of his high-rise, Ethan shed the layers of the past week like a too-tight coat. The air in his apartment was warm and sterile, clean, untouched, his sanctuary. He dropped his luggage in the hallway and made his way to the window. The view of Biscayne Bay always offered him clarity, but tonight it mirrored his own inner fog. He stood there for a long while, arms crossed, eyes lost in the horizon. The hum of his laptop filled the silence as he opened it, flipping through unread emails. One from his accountant flagged a foundation report funding liquidity tax recommendations, new disbursement options. It would be easy to ignore it, to file it away in the growing cabinet of decisions postponed. But Ethan clicked. The back-end dashboard of one of his anonymous foundations loaded slowly. The same clean interface, the same impersonal gray boxes. Except now, one stood out, a pending inquiry from a Miami nonprofit specializing in family-based financial rescues. He stared at the form. Ryan's consulting firm was listed as one of the at-risk recipients. Ethan's stomach coiled. The instinct to close the tab surged, but he paused. What would peace look like? With slow precision, he began typing one-time grant underwritten through a secondary arm of the foundation. Anonymous, with no names attached. Enough to clear debts, pay employees by time. Not a rescue, just a chance. He signed the authorization, clicked submit, and sat there, heart pounding in the quiet. He would not tell Ryan. He wouldn't even let Claire know. This wasn't about clearing a conscience or winning a silent war. It was a declaration to himself, I choose not to carry this weight anymore. The knock came around 8 p.m. Lydia. She breezed in with 2 iced coffees and a takeout bag from their favorite Venezuelan diner. You look like someone who's been marinating in existential dread. He cracked a smile. Is it that obvious? She dropped onto the couch and kicked off her shoes. You've got guilt eyes, and your voice has that I just processed 10 years of trauma rasp. Ethan handed her a napkin. It's been a week. She popped open the empanada box and handed him one. Tell me everything. As they ate, he recounted the entire visit, the party, Claire's awakening, the confrontation with Ryan, his parents' quiet reconciliation. And now Lydia asked licking sauce from her thumb. I gave something, he said, money, through the foundation. Ryan will never know. She leaned back, surprised but not shocked. You really did it. I had to, Ethan said. Not for him, for me. She was quiet for a beat. Most people want apologies. You gave grace. I don't think forgiveness is a transaction, he said. It's a release. And I didn't want to live the rest of my life chained to old anger. Lydia smiled, warm and tired. I hope he uses it well. I don't care if he does. She raised an eyebrow. I mean it, Ethan said. That's the freedom of it. My healing doesn't depend on his redemption. The weight of that truth settled between them. They stayed there for hours watching the city light flicker against the waves. They didn't say much. They didn't need to. As midnight crept in, Lydia dozed off against the armrest, a book open on her lap. Ethan covered her with a throw blanket, then stepped onto the balcony. The sea was dark and infinite. He thought about Ryan, about Claire, about his parents, about the child version of himself that used to hide in closets when the world felt too loud. You're not hiding anymore, he thought. You built a world loud enough to hold you. Behind him, the warmth of his apartment. Ahead of him, the endless unknown. Ethan smiled. Forgiveness, he realized, wasn't weakness. It was proof he'd survived long enough to offer it freely. 2 weeks later, Ethan sat alone in the Vivid Mind studio, the familiar lights dimmed low, the cameras idle. A live stream had been announced that morning, but without a title or topic, just a date and time. Within hours, thousands of followers RSVP'd. Curiosity rippled across the platform like electricity. Ethan adjusted the mic, took a long breath, and went live. Good evening, he began. This is Ethan Dawson. You've known my voice. Tonight I'd like to show you my face. He leaned closer to the camera, heart pounding with every word. For years I've hidden behind a logo and a mission statement. Not out of fear, but out of pain. The truth is, I grew up believing I wasn't enough. Not smart enough, not loud enough, not chosen. Many of you know what that feels like. The comment section exploded, but Ethan didn't look away. I was told I'd never make it unless I changed, so I disappeared. I built Vivid Mind, not as a company, but as a refuge for the quiet ones, the overlooked, the left behind. He paused, letting that truth breathe. Recently, life pulled back the curtain. Some of you learned who I was. I didn't plan it, but I'm no longer hiding. Because the people I serve, the young creators, the dreamers, they deserve more than silence. He clicked to share his screen. A presentation opened. The Young Creators Fund, Ethan said. Starting today, we're launching a program dedicated to funding creative projects by underrepresented voices, particularly youth, who were told, like I once was, that they didn't matter. Details flashed: mentorship opportunities, scholarships, equipment, grants, studio residencies. This isn't charity, he continued. It's investment, it's belief in potential, not pedigree. Every great idea deserves a place to grow. He shifted in his chair, eyes flicking to the comments again. Waves of gratitude, stories of viewers with similar pasts. Encouragement from old subscribers and new ones alike. The response overwhelmed him. Messages flooded the chat. I needed this. Thank you for speaking up. I've been scared to start. Not anymore. Tonight, Ethan said, voice thick. We take one step further out of the shadows. Not just me, but all of us. Your voice matters. Your dream matters. If you've ever felt invisible, know this: you are seen. The live stream ran for an hour. When it ended, silence fell over the studio like dusk after a summer storm. Lydia entered with 2 mugs of tea, wordless, setting one beside him. She watched him exhale, his posture softening. That was brave, she said finally. He looked at her. It was necessary. Outside the glass walls, the city pulsed, but inside something shifted. Ethan leaned back in his chair, thinking of the kid he used to be, the one who never felt heard, who shrank into corners. He wasn't shrinking anymore. I want to build something bigger than content, he said aloud. A place, a campus maybe. Somewhere kids can come to create, heal, grow. No judgment, no comparison. Lydia smiled. You're becoming who you needed. Ethan nodded. And maybe who others need too. The seed of an idea took root that night. Not just a fund, but a legacy. Later, lying in bed, Ethan stared at the ceiling. For years, he'd chased milestones, trying to prove something to himself, to his family, to the world. But now he was trying to give, and that changed everything. Weeks passed, and the ripples of Ethan's public reveal continued to spread. Media picked up the story. Invitations to speak at panels and write memoirs landed in his inbox. But Ethan responded to none. He didn't need to speak further. What he had said was enough. He had nothing to prove. His family, too, shifted quietly. Thomas and Margaret began to call not often but regularly enough that it felt intentional. They asked questions. They listened longer. Once Margaret even sent a recipe Ethan remembered from childhood scrawled in her delicate handwriting. There was a gentleness in their voices now, as if in his visibility they'd finally seen him. Ryan, on the other hand, vanished for a while. The firm recovered thanks to the anonymous donation, but his personal life was unraveling. Ethan didn't follow the details, though others whispered them to him. The only message Ethan received came one early morning, a single-line text that simply read, "Thanks." No punctuation, no follow-up, no signature, though unnecessary. Ethan stared at it for a moment, then tucked the phone away. He didn't need more. Not closure, not a conversation. That word was enough to mark the end of something or the beginning of something else. Claire, meanwhile, had not only separated from Ryan but taken up a consulting role on the Young Creators Fund. Her background in corporate communication became invaluable, and her presence was calm, steady. They never discussed Ryan again, not out of avoidance, but out of mutual understanding. Some stories closed themselves. She and Lydia became frequent visitors to Ethan's studio. They planned outreach events, reviewed grant applications, brought in stories from struggling creators across the country. Ethan listened, advised, and sometimes simply observed. It was enough. On the fund's launch day, Ethan stood at the Campus to Be's Cornerstone site, an empty lot nestled in an underserved Miami neighborhood. It would soon become a creative haven. He wore a simple button-down, sleeves rolled up, and held a photograph himself as a boy, maybe 9 years old, holding an old film camera nearly the size of his chest. The crowd gathered was modest but meaningful partners. Supporters, teens from the pilot program. Lydia stood nearby, notebook in hand, as always. A stage had been set. A mural behind it read, "Everyone deserves to be seen." Ethan stepped up and spoke with quiet confidence. "This isn't just about giving," he said. "It's about seeing those who were overlooked and teaching them to see themselves." He shared a few words about his journey but kept the focus outward. He named young creators who had already made waves in the pilot phase, told their stories, handed them the microphone. Applause filled the space. Thunderous applause followed, but Ethan didn't linger in the spotlight. He moved through the crowd slowly, shaking hands, answering questions, posing for a few photos. That evening, he walked alone along the edge of the Miami shoreline. The breeze wrapped around him like a whisper. He pulled out the photograph again, the boy with the camera. The one no one believed in, the one who had always looked for the light. He remembered taking that photo. It had been his father's camera, one of the rare moments of shared silence. No approval, just allowance. "I see you now," Ethan whispered. He smiled, not for anyone else but for himself. And as the sky melted into twilight, Ethan understood he had become the man that boy needed. And in doing so had found the only recognition that ever mattered. The sea shimmered under moonlight. Behind him, the voices of a new generation echoed off brick and stone dreams taking root in soil he once believed barren. He walked on camera in hand, the wind in his hair, not running from his past, but walking toward his future.